My name is Nick Gowing, founder and director of Thinking the Unthinkable, normally based in London. There are no unthinkables happening in this world. But what we want to do is explore the Western Balkans for the next 50 minutes. And Mirek has to leave sharply in order to get back to Brussels. He's simply come here for 3 hours for this session. This is a time of extraordinary coincidence, because at this very moment, the NATO Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, is actually in Pristina. He was in Bosnia yesterday, and he's going to Belgrade tomorrow. Shortly after, the European Commission President van der Leyen has been in the region as well. An enormous amount is happening at high speed. There have been events as well in Kosovo. So there's an incredible dynamic, but begging that question, which has been taken off the screen, about old problems, new challenges. And Mirek Lajcek is responsible for maintaining dialogue, and what we want to hear about is what kind of level of dialogue there is, not just in the Serb-Kosovo dialogue, but also in other dialogues involving Bosnia, involving Serbia, where there are elections coming up in December. Things are moving. There's dynamic as well. We want to get an assessment of that and the kind of feeling there is there optimism? Is there a degree of positiveness? Or is it the same old plates spinning? Now, I'd like to know, just at this stage, so far you haven't been asked at all for any questions. Are any of you likely to be wanting to ask questions of the panel? Because it would be great to know, because I'd like to leave time for that. So even if you haven't got a question at the moment, but if you feel motivated to ask a question, please give me an indication. Hand up. I don't see any hands at the moment, but I will try, and we have 2 microphones, but I'm not going to ask the questions now. So welcome to you, each of you. And Mirek, let me start with you, because we need to find out what happened on September the 24th in Kosovo, when there was a gun battle, a policeman was killed, and 3 Serbs were killed as well. It's been described as one of the worst incidents since the end of the war in 1999. Now, 6 weeks on, what's your assessment of that? Because the Prime Minister of Kosovo alleged that there was involvement of Chinese weapons, Russian weapons, there were criminal activities as well. How much has that been a serious setback for you, or is it just something you have to accept?
Good afternoon, everyone. And to answer your question, Nick, what happened on 24th of September was a very serious thing. It was a violent attack. Some people even say terrorist attack. When you have 22 cars fully loaded with weapons entering Kosovo illegally, then obviously you ask the question, what was the purpose? And it was an attempt that went wrong because they were stopped by the police, and as a result, as you said, 1 Kosovo policeman and 3 Kosovo Serbs were killed. Politically, it was a very damaging and unfortunate moment, because we are in a geopolitical situation when the Balkans are again in the center of attention, when European Union rediscovered the need to complete the process of enlargement and accession, when we want the Balkans to stop producing more history than they can absorb. And for this, normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia is a key element, because this is not an issue between Kosovo and Serbia. This is a regional issue. Every part of the region is affected by the state of relations between them. And we have a process. We have a clear pathway, Ohrid agreement from February and March this year. We know exactly what we need to do.
Is that still alive, the Ohrid agreement?
It is still alive, but I expected us to be further, I expected to see further progress or more progress in its implementation. And that was a big setback. That really threw us back. It destroyed the limited trust that there is between Kosovo and Serbia. And of course, it focused our attention on other issues rather than normalization. But what I'm saying is that what happened on the 24th must be investigated. People who are behind it must be held accountable. But this does not change the fact that both Kosovo and Serbia are bound by the agreement from Ohrid, and they need to normalize their relations if they want to progress on the European path. And for this, there is only one platform, which is the dialogue on normalization.
Can I ask you, I mean, was there state involvement in this incident? There's a reason for me asking you this, because obviously some say there was criminal elements, but since then there has been intense diplomatic activity. And I'm therefore wondering whether it was a calculation which went wrong by somebody.
It's not for me to make this conclusion. Kosovo has already finalized their investigation. They presented their papers which says very explicitly that there was state involvement. The opinion on the side of the European Union is that action or activity of this scale could not happen without certain involvement or support from certain structures of the state.
Because in the sequencing of diplomacy, and your responsibilities, I'm quoting it here directly, responsible special representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue and Western Balkans. For your job, you've got to have dialogue. And I would suggest to you that on October the 26th and after that, there has been significant dialogue and you've been maintaining it. Additionally, you've had von der Leyen in the region within the last 2 weeks, and at this very moment, you've got Stoltenberg from NATO as well. How do we read that at a time when certainly people, and I last saw you, I think, at the Bled Forum back in September, there was that sort of sense of gloominess. Is there a slight scintilla of positiveness emerging?
Well, the positive thing is, and as ironic as it sounds, it was the Russia's aggression against Ukraine that brought back the geopolitical momentum with regard to the Western Balkans. This was a wake-up call for the European Union. This was the understanding that we cannot keep these countries halfway through, and we need to complete the process of enlargement. And European Union is very serious about it, because this has been said for many years, but the commitment was not there. Right now the commitment is there. So we have a new geopolitical momentum. Ukraine has opened the window for the West, or the door for the Western Balkan countries. The question is whether they are able to enter through that door, because they lost trust in enlargement process. They still are not sure whether European Union is serious, but European Union is. But I have to say that in more than 20 years that I've been dealing with the region, this is the first time I see European Union more ready for the Balkans than the Balkans for the European Union. And that's the irony of the moment.
Yanis and Vasilis, if you can just be patient, I just want to get some basic facts. So we're at least talking, we're delighted that Mirek's here to join us to set clear where we are, where the baseline is at the moment. But when you look at, for example, what the EU said on November the 8th, that to Bosnia, essentially, you're still not ready. You're still not ready for accession talks. Is that something that's going to hamper the ambition to have up to 9 more countries going into accession talks for the European Union?
Well, European Union just presented, the European Commission just presented its annual progress report last week for all the countries of the Western Balkans, and it's not a very optimistic reading, because the most frequent words you find there is some progress or limited progress, and equally frequent word is corruption, like not sufficient fight against corruption. So Bosnia and Herzegovina, again, ironically, could be happier than the others, because European Commission is saying we are ready to recommend starting the accession negotiations once we consider that they have fulfilled the criteria, but the criteria are not defined. So it's very vague. While in the case of Ukraine or Moldova, the Commission is saying we will start the accession negotiations once you deliver on these 3 pieces of legislation or these 4 pieces of legislation. So it's very clear and measurable. So Bosnia and Herzegovina got more than the rest of the region, but they need to deliver. And the country is moving forward and backwards at the same time. That's the problem in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And also, there is a feeling in the Balkans that European Union is being geopolitical with regard to Ukraine and Moldova, while bureaucratic and technical with regard to the Balkans. Every country in the Western Balkans will tell you we are better prepared than Ukraine. And how come you are so generous with Ukraine and you are so rigid with us? So this is one of the dilemmas of the current momentum which will need to be addressed as well.
Let me ask a couple of details before widening it out. When you speak to President Vučić and you say, when are you going to recognize Kosovo? After all, there's global recognition of Kosovo. Is this just playing for time, do you believe? Or is there a tactical element to this? Because, you know, in the end, that could unlock it. And I was very struck by a phrase from Marcus Tanner, the veteran journalist, who said, no side yet is desperate enough for a breakthrough.
My mandate says that I am responsible for the normalization of relations and for reaching a comprehensive agreement, legally binding agreement between Kosovo and Serbia on normalization of relations. It's for them to define what normalization of relations means. It's not for me to say that. But what I want to say is that we have gotten further than ever in the dialogue with our agreements from February and March, which clearly stipulate what we want to see. And if you read this agreement, it clearly says that Kosovo will establish the association for Serb-majority municipalities. Kosovo will...
That's the 8 municipalities in the north of the country.
4 in the north and 6 in the south.
10, sorry.
Then Kosovo will protect the Serbian Orthodox Church, while Serbia will recognize Kosovo's institutions, documents, symbols, will not prevent Kosovo's membership in international organizations, and they will exchange diplomatic missions, and they will obviously develop friendly relations. So everything is in their agreement, but there was very little implementation since March. And that's why we, the facilitators, international community, European Union, United States, we made one step for them. We drafted the statute of this association, which is the key document, and I presented it to President Vučić, to Prime Minister Kurti on the 21st of October. And now we are, where we are with the process is, we asked them to accept this paper. And this was the purpose of the meeting between the two of them, and President Macron, Chancellor Scholz, Prime Minister Meloni, President Michel, and High Representative Borrell, myself, in Brussels. So this is where we are. I would say it's again a positive phase of the process. We are discussing about concrete steps forward.
As you say, you've been 20 years in the diplomatic business, including as President of the General Assembly at the United Nations, and also as Foreign Minister of Slovakia. Can you already begin to see where there's common ground, but they're not quite there yet?
Let me be self-critical as a representative of the European Union. We have neglected this region for too long. We have been saying that their future is in the European Union, but we were not acting accordingly. For maybe 10 years, this process was losing credibility. And now we woke up because of the war in Ukraine, and we realized that we really have not done a good job in the Balkans, but they are not in the good shape. So they are still very skeptical, and we need to convince them that we are serious, and they need, of course, to do their homework.
It'll take time.
But we don't have time. We don't have time. So that's why, as I said, this is the irony. That we are convincing them that this time we are serious, and they are very skeptical. But you know, I mean, the geopolitical momentum never lasts forever for long. So the window of opportunity opens, and we either turn it into a new quality or it will close again.
Did you fear that the events of the 26th of September might have shut the door again?
No, because it was a very negative element between Kosovo and Serbia, but it does not change the positive geopolitical momentum for the region and between the European Union and the region.
Sorry, I should have said 24th. Let me just broaden this out. Let's get a view from Brussels. Janez, what's your view about how this is happening and what you're seeing in the corridors in the Union, in the European Council? There's a European Council coming up in after the Serb election.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I'm happy to be here, and I would like to think that I am the embodiment of the European perspective of the Western Balkans, in the sense that I participated in the Thessaloniki European Union Summit of 2003. I had a lot of a lot of hair at the time, believe it or not, and look how now this has become. And it's a bit emblematic of how the European prospect of the region has become as well, because there was a lot. It was a feel-good moment, full of promise, and then that promise kept thinning and thinning and thinning. And what do you do when you lose your hair? You grow a beard, which is what we both did, the EU and the Western Balkans. We tried to ensure a little semblance of an accession process, keeping the thing just afloat enough so that it would not sink or run aground, and then giving them admittedly generous amounts of money so that they would, on their side, promote some reforms and at least spare the rest of Europe the kind of horrors that we had experienced during the 90s. And we were at a point where we could not, if we say in Greece we need an omelette, but to make an omelette you have to break eggs, and nobody was willing to break eggs.
Do you think they are now?
Yeah.
Do you think they are now?
Well, we had we found a chef, a good chef in Vladimir Putin, who, as Miroslav said, recreated some momentum for the region. We all realized that it could not left behind, and at the same time promote the candidatures of Ukraine and Moldova, as well as Georgia. So we are now in a situation where there is an opportunity, but it has to be seized. And for that to happen, we have to overcome some problems. On the side of the Western Balkans, we keep saying that we keep referring to the Western Balkans, but one problem is that it is not it's not a homogeneous group, and the problems of Bosnia and Herzegovina are different from the ones of Albania or North Macedonia. Serbia and Kosovo are neutralizing one another. Montenegro has just come out of a difficult domestic situation. We hope that they used to be the front runners. They can become that again. So that's one difficulty. The other one is that sometimes the countries of the region do not help themselves, either with provocations or with not doing things that we would have wanted them to do. I'm referring also to the alignment with CFSP decisions, and especially in these times where of geopolitical upheaval. Also, it would be great if they could promote the connectivity between themselves, because if the region is not connected in various areas, it is difficult then to see how together they might become part of Europe. And then on the side of the EU, let's face it, there are some member states that are not the hooligans of enlargement, let's put it this way. They're not the most fervent supporters.
Hooligans?
I'm sorry?
You did say hooligans
yes,
of enlargement.
Yeah, they're not the die-hard supporters of enlargement.
Is that a phrase you use in Brussels?
It's a way of saying no. It's just after lunch to keep the audience awake. So they're not the biggest friends of enlargement. Let's put it in a more milder soporific way. There are countries that focus only on the eastern neighborhood, and even when they refer to the Western Balkans, they might see it through the prism of Ukraine. Like, for instance, Serbia is not aligning with EU decisions, and therefore we should not be making any progress on EU-Serbia relations. We will definitely need, as EU, to do our homework so that we can increase our absorption capacity, and also I'm worried by the recent decision by the German Supreme Court, because it will make it a lot more difficult to agree on a review of the multi-annual financial framework, and also to find the money for the growth plan for the Western Balkans that the Commission has been rightly publicizing as a potential game changer. And this is bad because at the end of the day, no matter what the geopolitical parameters are for to continue with on the enlargement path, all these future accession agreements will need to be ratified one way or the other. So you need governments to win the hearts of the European citizens, and therefore that may be complicated. So we need to seize the momentum so that hopefully things can happen. I don't know, a wig, a transplant, so that the Western Balkans are as good looking as Miroslav or Vasilis or where is Mr. Tsomokos, and not like me. Thank you.
Vasilis, just before I come to you, Mirek, just let me pick up on, I'm not going to ask you about hooligans in the European Union, but I would like to ask you about the perception of the Western Balkans. Easy to think that it's somehow a homogeneous region. And I likened it when we were sitting down there to a Rubik's Cube. You can feel you're getting something right, and then suddenly something else goes wrong, and immediately everything's thrown out of kilter. How do you feel now, both as a former member of one of the governments, now as a special representative?
Well, it's true that the region is homogeneous. Each part of the region, each country is at a different stage of the process. At the same time, it's incredibly interlinked, and they are watching each other very carefully. So for years there has been very little progress, and therefore very little motivation on their side to do something. I'm absolutely certain that if there is a substantial progress on the side of one country from the region, it will really kickstart the rest of the region, because they don't want to be left behind. That's very clear. For the time being, there was no motivation for them to work hard. So now the question is whether we will manage to really start this process. At the same time, and this is very important, what was mentioned here, that we have this twist, positive change on the side of European decision makers, policy makers, but there is also European public. And yes, you understand geopolitically how important it is to bring the Western Balkans into Europe, but you also have to convince your citizens, and they don't really care much about geopolitics, right? So they would worry about the jobs, about social dumping, about intra-European
Which is a much bigger problem than the Western Balkans only.
Yeah, so yes, but this is the problem that the European member states have been facing with each new enlargement. So some people are saying that this current situation can be described as a geopolitical necessity and political impossibility. But as you think to the unthinkable, we also have to make impossible possible. I think that's our challenge and our task.
We also think the unpalatable. Does anyone want to, we've got 25 minutes, so think about, I'm going to come to you in a moment, but does anyone want to ask a question or give me notice they'd like to ask a question? I've got plenty of questions, but I don't want you to feel that you've been left out of the discussion. Okay, I'll get I'm not going to ask you to ask it yet, but I'm moving the microphone in your direction. So stand by, and I'll be back with you in 4 or 5 minutes. Vasilis.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for the very intriguing questions that introduce the point that I want to make. I know I have only a couple of minutes to make the point. I want to provoke a bit and to say, start by saying what a terrible thing the European Union has done to the Balkans. We put them in limbo for over 20 years now. So a nice way of saying it is that we've took our eye off the ball and we weren't very, very serious about the accession, but now we are. Another way of saying it is that we created a whole industry in the Balkans playing a game of pre-accession, token compliance, I'll do a bit, I'll take it back, I will be friendly, no I won't, and so forth. And I think this has created even, sort of cultivated mindsets and created generations of maybe not politicians, because politicians would always do that, but definitely people in, officials, people in official positions who do policy. They do not expect accession is going to happen. They just play the game in the same way that, the football club who always ends up in the 12th position in the championship. They never try to win it. They know they're not going to get relegated, so they just, continue on. And there's a bit of sense of that in the Balkans. I would like to propose, also coming obviously as an academic from the literature, that we have misframed the problems in the Balkans. No state, no democracy, no country is perfect in meeting EU conditionality. I come from Greece, we are in Greece. We know the country had some problems with following EU conditionality. We know there's problems with post-accession conditionality. And here we are telling weak states, states that can be swayed and taken by different interests and geopolitical forces, we tell them, you have to be perfect. The EBRD wants the Western Balkans to meet the 6 qualities of a well-governed Western democracy, including being leaders in the green transition. I don't want Kosovo to be a leader in the green transition. I want it to be a decently behaving member within the European Union, and let Germany and Greece perhaps take the further step for the green transition. My point, of course, is not about Kosovo not being green. My point is that we're changing, moving the goalposts, as we used to say, and we're putting the bar too high, making the game non-credible. What the real problem is, and I'll finish with that, is that there are some countries that face problems with corruption, democracy, and media freedom and so forth. We have it also inside the European Union. We have many cases of that. Let them in. Let those countries in, and they will find the resolve and the mechanism through which they will become better and better. Then we have another group of countries, including obviously Ukraine and Moldova, that face statehood issues. They face issues of ethnic divisions, obviously, with Ukraine, aggression, external aggression. These things cannot be equated to accession. It's not about accession conditionality. This is about conflict resolution. And in a way, my idea is that this thing has to be decoupled. There are some countries that do not face external threats or internal ethnic divisions to the extent that we would make them, sort of focal point. So these countries, we have to have an accelerated accession, a 2004 moment where we set the date, 2027, 2028, and we let them in. And if they fail to get in, they don't get in. But that is the momentum that we need to create. Otherwise, we're going to keep talking and giving brownies and cookie points for good behavior and then take them back for bad behavior.
How much do you think the constant change of governments and leaderships and the natural progress of democracy, however you want to define it, or at least pluralism and voting rights, how much is that creating problems when there's a logical direction of travel here?
I think the point is that we have to understand that what happens in the Balkans is endogenous, as I would say as an academic, endogenous to what happens in the external environment, the European Union and the wider geopolitics. So why do we have, more sort of move towards more authoritarianism, less democracy, less well-functioning democratic process? Because everything, the ideas of the public, the interests of the politicians are skewed, are affected by what we do. We play a game, and that game necessitates that you will have some leaders that are going to capture the game.
Okay, please, you've got the microphone. Does anyone else want the microphone? Who else would like a microphone? Anyone else would like to ask a question? Please, go ahead.
Hello.
Introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Susana Lisgara. I am a lawyer, legal expert in free movement of services and freedom of establishment, working in the field of trade and services, especially in West Balkan. My question concerns the free movement of people from the 1st of January of 2024, especially from Kosovo, within EU, so they will be able to travel without visa. And if this will affect EU, and especially Greece, because of the distance. And second part of my question, whether there are any thoughts in order to facilitate also trade in services between, especially Kosovo with EU, and especially Greece, because we have close economic connections.
Thank you. By the way, we can take any questions in Greek as well, because I'm wearing headset. Anyone else want to come in? I'll get the microphone to you. Mirek, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, sure. First on the visa, I'm glad it's happening because the truth is that the Kosovo was the last nation in Europe which was left out of the visa liberalization process, and they felt it as a huge injustice. And they have met the conditions like a couple of years ago already. So the process, it has been completed, and 1st of January 2024, citizens of Kosovo will also enjoy visa-free travel. I have always been in favor of freedom of movement. It's one of the huge positive things about the European Union, and I'm glad that, yes, they will not be excluded from this. I don't want to speculate. There are people who are saying there might be like increased brain drain, or that the young people, educated people will be leaving Kosovo. There are other people who are saying people who wanted to leave, they have left already, and they don't expect any significant impact. But in general, this is a good thing. On your second question, yes, Ambassador already mentioned this, and I want to be very precise. European Union, to show how serious we are with the region, European Commission is preparing a growth plan for the Western Balkans, which I see as something like Marshall Plan after the World War II. We speak about 6 billion euros, 2 billion in grants and 4 billion in soft loans. And the purpose is to boost economic growth, but also to promote regional cooperation, but also to bring the Western Balkans into the European single market. And you have 7 very concrete areas: free movement of goods, free movement of services and workers, access to the single euro payment area, integrating road transport, integrating energy markets, digital single market, and integration into industrial supply chains. So these are very specifically defined areas where the countries of the Western Balkans can participate, but it's linked to strict conditionality, so they need to meet the condition. But the difference will be huge for those who will be part of this growth plan.
But just picking up the thread of that question, the economic implications of large numbers of people leaving a place like Kosovo at a time when they need to be able to generate new startups, new businesses, and so on. That's it.
Thank you. It's a great question, because, of course, whatever can contribute to more people-to-people contacts, young, whole population getting a little out of a sense of isolation and injustice, because again, as Miroslav said, this is something that we had promised in the past, and it took years for it to happen. All this is great, but then at the end of the day, you also want people, and especially the younger generations, to stay where they are, because they represent the future for their countries. And for that, you need to create the proper opportunities. You need to create jobs. Sometimes you may need to create something even more than that. Every time that I travel to Tirana, it has happened for a number of reasons in recent years. I'm surprised at how every time it's a different city, more developed, more prosperous, more buildings, more restaurants, more everything. And yet the young Albanians leave the country. So there must be a parameter in the equation which we would have to analyze. So the idea is to sort of really create the conditions for the people to stay there, so that, of course, in the future they can profit from all the various freedoms that the member states can enjoy, but at the same time they can contribute to their countries being peaceful and prosperous.
Same point here, I think, but we shouldn't be afraid of people leaving their places. If they leave their places, presumably they go somewhere else where they actually achieve better, or hopefully achieve better. People can come back and will come back when the conditions back home are attractive enough, are good enough for them to go and thrive. Let the Kosovars go to London and Berlin and develop the skills and the network that will be useful when they get a job in Pristina in a startup. Don't let them stay in Pristina in a café and wait for the startup to happen. So we shouldn't be afraid of that. And also on the growth plan, the Marshall Plan was something that we needed maybe 30 plus years ago, but we still mix conditionality, specific plans, a period of time which is well over a 5-year period, and we know it's going to be bumpy, it's not going to happen. the best way to stimulate the economies is actually to integrate the economies. And then if you have problems after integration, then you can come in with the money and try to remedy the problems, distributional problems, problems of, I don't know, depopulation, movement of capital, and so forth. We don't need to orchestrate now what we didn't orchestrate in the 90s.
I wanted to say yes, but I fully agree with you, and I'm a strong supporter of the enlargement. But there is always a but. And if you say, and I hear this a lot in the region, just take us in, just integrate us. But first of all, they need to be ready to perform. Their economy must be ready to compete as a part of the European single market, which, if you read the progress reports, they are not. So that means this could destroy their economies at this stage. And second important point, and Ioannis knows something about it, is the decision-making ability of the European Union. You also need to make sure it's not a gesture. They also need to be able to function when it comes to making decisions in the European Union, and that's also very important. So it's the goodwill is good, but we have to make sure that we will not destroy them, and they will not destroy our already quite damaged ability to be united and efficient.
Thank you. Anyone want to come in, please? Microphone? Can you see a hand going up? Can anyone? Did we answer your question? Good, okay. All right, I can't see any hand. We've got 10 minutes to go, so don't say to me at the end, I put my hand up, but it was too late. Let me pick up on a slightly more negative way of taking this forward. How much is their carrot and how much is their stick? Because one of the things being discussed is sanctions. Do you believe, and it hasn't really worked against Russia, do you believe that really sanctions are too easy a political default as opposed to something which can really change the atmosphere in which you're working at the moment?
I personally believe in positive motivation, not in negative motivations. It's hard to imagine that you can achieve good things through sanctions. That's point one. Yes, sanctions come into play when someone has done deliberately something against the rules, knowingly. Yeah, but when we speak about European integration, the worst sanction imaginable is that you will be left out of this process, because that's the damage you are doing to your country and your people.
Should we be talking about sanctions?
Well, my point one is that I would respectfully slightly disagree with you. I think that sanctions against Russia have been effective, not to the point where we would have wanted to, but I'm sure the Russian economy could have done without the sanctions. And the second point is, I have seen it happen many times. The threat of sanctions is much more effective than the imposition of sanctions, because very often, because once you've crossed the Rubicon, it's very difficult to come back. And the fact that we reached the point where the word sanctions was being discussed may have been, I don't know if you felt that it helped you in your job, but it may have been an alarm clock that helped certainly in the case of Serbia and Kosovo.
Yeah, likewise. I think positive incentives are, the first preference, and sanctions should be more directed when there's clear non-compliance, and also some sort of capture of the process that there's a particular group or elite that actually takes the process in one direction and you want to sanction. That said, also, of course, and I don't want to be always the pessimistic person on the panel, but also positive incentives do not necessarily work, because there's an expectation about positive incentives. There's a market for these positive incentives. So the positive incentives in some way have to be more surprising in order to stimulate.
Vasilis has both hair and a beard.
One of the reasons I ask, and I'm going based on reporting here, Mirek, is the fact that the former head of the Serb intelligence agency stepped back rather unexpectedly, and that was seen as a response, even if you couldn't actually say there was an automatic response, that was seen as a gesture in response to the talk of sanctions.
Yes, but I would not say this was unexpected. This was long expected, because he was blacklisted by the United States for explicit number of reasons. So since that happened, it was to be expected that sooner or later the person will step down, because it's impossible to imagine a country which is part of the European integration process to have a head of intelligence service who is on the United States blacklist. That's really simply.
So that's a step forward. It's a step forward.
The fact that he stepped down, yes, that means he recognized the fact that he has become a liability for the country.
Last request, if there is one question, now's your time to ask it. In which case, I'm going to ask all three of you. Let's go from the other end, Vasilis. What about the impact now of the generational change and what you're seeing across all the nations, large and small, about the impact, if at all, that is having on the political complexion, which could make this process and these processes more straightforward and less turbulent?
So I don't travel in the region or in the capitals as much as other people perhaps in the panel, but the sense I have from interactions also including by students that we get sometimes from the region in London, is that the issue of the resolution of the accession process becomes a bit less important, less urgent. Visa liberalization, the ability to travel, hugely important. But after that, then the whole idea about are we in the European Union, are we getting in the European Union, has lost a bit its currency, if you want. Obviously not in across all the population or the young population in the region, but definitely in parts of the population, of the young population in the region. And especially people who can go out, people who can move to whatever it is, Paris and London and Berlin and other places, and pursue at a personal level a career and pursue their dreams. Really, the question about European accession is a bit passé, is the parents' kind of concern. I'm generalizing, obviously, this is not the majority of people, but there is a sense of that. Likewise, I think, I had much more intense and interesting conversations with Europeans, I mean, people from EU countries in my university talking about enlargement than I have today. Nobody of my students who come from EU countries talks about enlargement anymore. This is not an issue.
Yes.
Well, we need to bring the train back on track, and
it's good.
Can you hear me?
Yep,
yeah.
Yep.
We need to bring the train back on track, and again, this is the unique opportunity to do so. And there are a few catchwords that I would hopefully want everybody to take with them. One is merit-based. I mean, you're absolutely right. Nobody's perfect. The Commission publishes every year a rule of law report on each and every member state, and there's always things that are not going well and recommendations on how to do better. But it is also true that the countries of the region have to make they try to achieve the best performance possible. Another, where I would wholeheartedly agree with you, is we need an end date which is credible and realistic, because without that, there will always be the temptation to kick the can down the road. And then a third catchword is gradual integration. So what is it that we can do to slowly bring those countries within the EU realm, make it feel more palpable? Greece belongs to a group of friends of enlargement, and with others, we have submitted proposals on how this could happen in the area of CFSP. And you could have, one could think even of a merit-based approach even on CFSP, in the sense that when you have countries that have aligned, for instance, with the EU sanctions against Russia, thus incurring the economic and political cost that goes with it, then we could have more meetings with them as a reward, so that we listen to their concern, but also maybe as an incentive to those that have not aligned with those sanctions. So there's plenty of things to do, but at the same time, we also need to do what we both mentioned earlier: absorption capacity. We need to do our homework so that we're ready to welcome them when they are ready as well.
Okay, well, I'm going to have one question for each of you, but firstly, Mirek, on the age issue, on the generational change, is that important in your calculations?
Well, unfortunately, this is the reality. People are no longer excited about the prospect of enlargement because they lost faith in it. So we need to bring this faith back. We need to bring the credibility of the enlargement back. This is negligence on our side, on the side of the European Union, and we need to. And we are now working very hard, and we will continue. There are so many things happening with regard between EU and the region. You mentioned the trips, President von der Leyen. Many others. We will have, we just had last week EU Western Balkans Foreign Ministerial meeting. We will have 13th of December EU Western Balkans Summit. European Council in December will be deciding on opening accession negotiations. So things are happening, and hopefully also the jealousy between the Balkans and the Ukraine will help. If they see Ukraine moving, they will not want to be left behind. So this could work.
Final question, Mirek, you picked this up first of all. This is not just a cheap moderator's question at the end of a session. We are facing potentially a very turbulent political year ahead with elections. There are elections in the Netherlands next week. There's Serbia. We've got, I think, at least 15 elections, one way or the other. We have Hungary as the presidency of the European Union from January. We have a new commission coming in, we hope. We have a European Parliament election, and of course we have the American election, and we have a Russian election. I'm just wondering what your feeling is, and it's easy for me to say this, whether it's 6 months or a year or 18 months. Is there a window of opportunity closing at the moment, which those who are dragging their heels might do well to think about?
Very good question. Out of all these elections you mentioned, for me the most relevant are two, European elections and the US elections. And obviously, as we get closer to the elections, the attention shifts elsewhere. It will not be in the Western Balkans, it will be on our internal processes. So therefore I say we need to make the important decisions now so that processes will run throughout the electoral year. If we wait with the important decisions until spring next year, they might never happen.
Vasilis.
Yes, exactly. The new commission, first of all, we hope it's going to be a very dynamic and well-coordinated commission, but we don't know that for a fact. But the new commission will have to deal with very big problems, including energy, Russia-Ukraine, the Middle East situation. So the chances that they will come in with the...
But we're talking about political uncertainty here as well.
Yes, yeah. But what I'm saying is that, no matter what happens in the different elections, when the new commission comes in, they will have to deal with a number of problems that are outside of the area of the Western Balkans. So the probability that they will come in with some sort of commitment for the process and a plan for the Balkans is very, very unlikely, very small. So exactly, we have to make sure that...
So now is the moment.
Now is the moment to set it up, so the new commission has to work on something.
Yanis.
Well, it is true that we do not work in a vacuum, and we're not Don Quixotes, going around and trying to achieve unrealistic results. But there will always be elections. There will always be problems, if not in the Netherlands, somewhere else. And so we cannot simply be paralyzed by that. Our job is to find solutions, to work as hard as we can to get results. Do we agree that it is in Europe's strategic interest to get the Western Balkans countries in the EU? If the answer is yes, then we need to do absolutely everything we can in order to achieve that. We might fail in the end, but we have absolutely we have the obligation, and we have absolutely no excuse not to do the very best we can.
Thank you all three of you, Vasilis, Ioannis and Mirek. Thank you very much indeed. I hope we've stopped in time for you to get your plane back to Brussels. Mirek, thank you very much.